The 8th episode of The Last of Us, titled When We Are in Need, is out. Here we see Ellie fending for herself when she runs into a group of people that attack Joel. What secrets do these people hold? And how does Ellie react when she discovers her dark secret? It's proving really difficult to decide whether to like the show. If you divorce it from its immaculate source material, the show seems a bit disjointed. That's because the show follows the major story beats of the game so closely that you can't help but think of the classic game if you've played it before. But not having Ellie fight alongside David and James against the infected was a huge opportunity lost. In the case of the 8th episode, the show's version of this storyline doesn't have quite as much dramatic impact as the same chapter from the game. As an episode of television, all of the scenes and performances work, but the religious overtones revolving around the antagonist, David, played by Scott Shepherd, feel needless, and the pacing of the episode doesn't serve the story well either. The episode's success really hinges on David's portrayal, and unfortunately, his characterization feels a little off from the beginning. The episode begins with showing David preaching to his people. It's clear that we're meant to feel something is off with David. Later, when Ellie meets David and James out in the woods, he comes off like a reasonable, compassionate person. If this had been the first time we as the audience met David, the reveal of his messiah complex and laundry list of revolting character traits would have been far more compelling. But by this point, we kind of have a feeling that he's not what he appears to be. In the game, when we meet David, we as players, just like Ellie, don't know whether to trust him or not. In the game, David and Ellie survive an infected horde together, so there's a bit of trust built there before his true, evil nature is fully revealed. On the show, Ellie essentially never forms any kind of connection to David at all, so it feels like less of an up and down emotional roller coaster for the viewer. This is the episode's biggest downfall. So much nuance is lost that it makes the episode fall flat, and for a show about infected hordes, we haven't seen much of that in a few episodes, which is incredibly disappointing. A lot of things about this episode are too telegraphed and heavy-handed to create the kind of slow burn tension the showrunners and the director were striving for. When one of David's men emerges from the lodge kitchen and the camera fixes on the tub of sloppily butchered mystery meat he's carrying, come on! We can put two and two together here. When it's later revealed that David's flock has been unknowingly chomping on their dead friends and family by Ellie noticing an ear on the floor outside her cage, the shock of the cannibalism revelation completely wore off. As for the acting, David's interactions with Ellie are acted well by Scott Shepherd and Bella Ramsey, with the first one in the cabin being the most engaging. But their later confrontation, with David trying to indoctrinate Ellie into his cult, is slathered with so much depravity and vitriol that it becomes too coercive, to the point where we have no choice but to hate everything about this guy. In other words, he's irredeemable to the point where he lacks any depth. We learn he's a lying, child-beating maniac, but did he really need to be all those things for us to hate him? It appears that the creators, in an attempt to add dimension to the already fascinating character from the game, actually dulled his impact on the story by dipping him in a vat of every modern taboo in the book. Aside from the episode's narrative imbalances, it does continue the show's undefeated streak of presenting exceptional performance from Pedro Pascal. Ramsey also does a decent job of showing Ellie's fighting spirit and toughness without ever letting go of her vulnerability. But her acting doesn't have a lot of range. Her face is often the same blank as every other scene she's in. That being said, her killing of David was brilliantly handled and reflected the game flawlessly. Pedro Pascal has a standout scene also. When Joel tortures and murders David's men in his search for Ellie, we can see that he is on a rampage to find her. But we also see that he's clearly done this before. We know he's done bad things in the past, but now we're seeing that he's willing to let that dark side of himself out if it means protecting Ellie. It's a violent scene to be sure, but it's also a nuanced one thanks to Pascal's tasteful, gradual unveiling of Joel's wrath. There are other issues with this episode, like how we never follow up with the rest of the flock, and the poor little girl who was tricked into literally eating her dead dad as she mourned him. Wouldn't the fallout of David's demise among the group be relevant to see? Maybe we shouldn't have been introduced to them at all. The game didn't suffer from their absence one bit. Thankfully, the episode ends on a high note, with Joel consoling Ellie after she's killed David. He calls her baby girl, signaling that he's embraced her as his daughter. The broken watch Sarah gave him is featured prominently as he squeezes Ellie tight. With only one episode left this season, the real question is, will we see what the non-game playing audience came to see? Zombies were a prominent feature of the game, yet they barely made an appearance throughout the entire first season of the show. I think this is because Neil Druckmann was more focused on stirring controversy with the alphabet soup messaging and enraging a certain segment of the population than actually recreating a faithful adaptation. Here's hoping the final episode can return to form. If you like this video, hit that like button and subscribe for more great content.